just read one paragraph. So today we'll discuss on science of living, is to know oneself and control oneself. An aimless life is always a miserable life. Every one of you should have an aim, but do not forget that on the quality of your aim will depend the quality of your life. Your aim should be high and wide, generous and disinterested. This will make your life precious to yourself and to others. But whatever your ideal, it cannot be perfectly realized unless you have realized perfection in yourself. To work for your perfection, the first step is to become conscious of yourself, of the different parts of your being, and their respective activities. You must learn to distinguish these different parts one from the other so that you may find out clearly the origin of the movements that occur in you, the many impulses, reactions, and conflicting wills that drive you to action. Let's stop here because there's a lot to read. Probably at the end, we'll add it. So, Julian, we'll start with you. If you want to share it.
Well, I find this essay so profound, and she's really weaving both advice to anyone and also calling people to their path. And I think it's profound in its simplicity and intensity, and contains a lot of the eternal verities of any tradition, to know yourself and to um, discern the planes and parts of your being. And many of the things that we are interested in awareness through the body, the witness consciousness, and knowing these different levels that we uh, exist on, and then this call to empathy and communication, whether we call it nonviolent communication or compassionate communication, to or to say from the Christian allegory of walking a mile in the other person's shoes, how do we use our minds in the best way possible? And this practice of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, Sri Aurobindo uses throughout his writing, and actually often argues the other side so compellingly. Um, I remember one time Ken Wilber read a section of Sri Aurobindo and thought that he was arguing the opposite of what he was arguing, and was kind of tarring Sri Aurobindo to say, oh, he was really, like this. And he never read the antithesis and synthesis. He just read the thesis, and it was interesting to see that. So it's so simple and yet so profound, and especially now when we're in a place of such deep division, to really see a point of view from someone else's perspective and have some almost deeper level of empathy that allows us to actually communicate. So it's very relevant, this this call to, yes, science of living. It's these fundamental principles that are so important, and of course calls us in our roles as teachers and educators to be the best that we can be in coming to a classroom or a exchange of ideas, And I've probably mentioned this before. You look at Mother's conversations with the teachers when they complain about the students, and she always comes back on the side of the students and, and castigates the teachers for not being more interesting, or, you know, you really have to be a yogi to be a teacher, I think, is the fundamental lesson out of all this. So tough call, but necessary.
Thanks, Julia. Wendy, do you want to share anything?
Well, what I like about this passage is that it's so accessible to everyone. I mean, like I have people come and say, well, what is yoga? Well, what are you doing there? And these sentences are something that I think everyone could relate to and understand and be inspired by, without any words that they don't understand or any aims that they don't understand, like even evolution, you know. So, but this is something that I think everyone could understand, and that makes it really valuable and worth remembering, you know, so that you really have the right words to say next time you get caught like that, which can be quite often. And so, you know, just a simple thing like that can get people on the right track, and they go, oh yeah, that sounds like something I want to do, or that I'd like my child to do, or, you know, it's useful thoughts. Yeah.
I like what you just said. I think you put your hand on it. To me, the central insight, especially in the first part of that essay, is that we tend to have a favorable explanation for our actions, and we have to hold those explanations up to the tribunal for our highest ideals. I think that practice, which is very hard, and we shield ourselves from even knowing how to do it, is what makes somebody the yogi to be the teacher. So what I liked about this essay was, after all our conversations in which we have explored each of these four disciplines, this was a clear way of putting them all together in a coherent pattern to see how all the parts interact with each other. So I liked it very much, and I agree. The language is accessible to even people who are resistant, one would think.
Also, it allows the flexibility of finding our own ways of connecting to a higher self and connecting to our ideal. David, would you like to share?
So, you know, I'm caught with this right at the beginning. I mean, the rest of it, I agree with what Andrea just said, of course, but this notion of aim, and can I share my screen for a minute? Is that okay? It says I'm disabled. I won't show anything bad, I promise.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So, you know, it relates to my relative obsession with the capacity of youth to find, to use this term, an aim. And this is really my inspiration in creating this guidebook, which I think I've talked about before in this group. But basically this notion of the capacity of youth, and I use the word youth rather than adolescent. I think adolescent is a category error that we're stuck with for a lot of different reasons we should get rid of over time. But there is this capacity of youth to really identify an aim and to find purpose and meaning in life in the years between, you know, 13 and 19, or for some slower learners in their 20s. So this, I think, is really, you know, fundamentally crucial for the evolution of consciousness in our species. And I do, you know, believe that something like this is really happening now, in the sense that there's an extraordinary number of people in their teens around the world who are stepping up into significant roles and responsibility and creativity in adult life. In the sciences and technology, and in activities of care for the earth, for ecosystems, for other human beings, and so on. So again, I like the clarity of the essay as a whole in terms of, well, here's the whole story, at least in outline. But again, I'm really, the place where I have most energy is right at that beginning, the sense of, I absolutely believe, Joseph Chilton Pearce, if you're familiar with his work at all, talked about this, the capacity of youth to find, a purpose in their lives. And unfortunately, to a large extent, there's just social norms to discredit this. And parents do this, both intentionally and unintentionally. Schools certainly do this, pretty much intentionally, although maybe not the intent of the people, but the impact of the structure, the social structure. And one of the ironies of our time is that the internet is, it's so profoundly reflective of humanity, both in its highest goods and in its most evil. And it's all out there. But the good part of it is that a lot of these youths are unbounded from limitations put on them by schools and are engaged in adult life in significant and creative ways. And I think that's perhaps one of the most positive, if not the most positive, manifestations on the planet today.
Dave, I really appreciate your succinct look at that initial exhortation. Later on, it says we need patience and endurance to look at what our actions are caused by and what our purpose, what our motivations are. And one of the things that seems useful about that is that those young people who are either cut off from their imaginations or urged to have an aim and purpose before they know what that really means or what it could be, are not given the time to be patient with themselves, or not shown what it means to endure until something is revealed to them that is cloudy. So I was stuck a little bit on that initial idea as well, because it seems to me that aim and quality of life are so intertwined that you can't tease them apart to make a recipe for it. That you have to have the patience and endurance to wait until it manifests itself, which is very hard for people of all parts of our culture, I think. So that is all.
Thank you, Andrea. Martha.
Yes, that aim and purpose in life is so crucial. And I love the way Mother lays it out there as initially, because everything else is grounded in that. And in a secular society such as ours, it's very hard for young people to find an aim that seems to fit with social norms. I think the highest ideal, unless you have a spiritual direction, would be humanitarian service, doing for others as much as you can. So that's inspiring, certainly. But also, it's not always in one's nature. You can say that, say, an artist or a poet can try to write on those themes or paint on those themes of to bring to awareness what what might be consistent with awakening people to to care about others or that sort of thing. But to know one's nature and is so crucial. And Mother lays out the steps there. You know, you have your goal, you seek to determine a goal, you seek to determine what's true to yourself, and then you seek to, it's really like the yoga overall, a little yoga in the practical nutshell, to determine, you know, what's consistent with your mental aspiration, your physical aspiration, your vital aspiration, and integrating all that. And if something's inconsistent, then you hold it up to that view, and you can determine it and eliminate it. So it's really determining your bhava, you might say, like your inner direction and who you are as a person. And once you know that, then you can so much better fulfill your purpose and be happy with it. So it really fits so consistently with any psychological healthy perspective related to a healthy and balanced individual, to developing a healthy and balanced psychology and life. And I think it's wonderfully profound and very practical. It gives us all the steps we need. It's so complete and so concise. I just really admire and love it.
And wide. It's this call to find out why you are here, and that there can be all different paths and techniques to getting there. It's just posing the right question and giving some indications, but this idea that you have to find it for yourself, and also implied that there is a purpose. Because, you know, if I see one more dystopian movie, I'm just going to scream, because it's constantly reinforcing this idea of degradation and chaos and environmental collapse, and none of the prescriptive, you know, you can do something that can make a change that matters, instead of this kind of inevitable entropic disintegration. And I think it's like a information pollution for culture to keep focusing on that rather than this, because this gives you a path to play your note in the symphony.
Thanks, Julian. Mira?
I actually really liked reading this, and it took me back to the Swadharma concept, and when Mother asked about what is your aim in life, and so it's going back and looking into ourselves to find our own strengths and to find our Swadharma so we can excel in what we do. And I like when Mother talked about talking about different thoughts and feelings, like trying to understand where it's coming from. Is it coming from the physical or vital or mental or psychic? And aspiring and have a strong determination to connect with the psychic and lead your life, you know, being connected to the psychic. And I think this strong determination will help us. And so that's what I got from that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like practical psychology.
Go ahead.
Yes,
Yeah.
Beth.
I think one word that can be misconstrued sometimes, especially by young people, is the word aim, because especially as they get into high school, what is your aim? What college do you want to go to? What do you want to study? So you're being asked to, you know, at that young age to really, you know, make a choice maybe of what you want to do. And so in the first sentence, you can be a little confused about what she's saying there. But then she very clearly says the aim is inward. It's towards self-control, self-perfection, self-knowledge. This is where you start. And so it takes away that fear of the outward. It's all an inner practice and inner growth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think later in the essay, she talks about again emphasizing on the external and connecting the internal and external to make sure it's expressed in the right way. It's manifested in the right way. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Or even how can we share this with adults or youth or anyone? Or how can we make it? Because like a lot of times, sometimes kids might have something, but they may not know it's their goal, or they may not be able to articulate it. Anybody wants to share working with kids?
Well, the first thing I think is to mend our language. I think, Wendy, you have it exactly right. If you ask too young, what do you want to be when you grow up? And in my life, where do you want to go to college? It's very hard for kids for them to resist that, to say, I don't know, or I'll find out when I get there. We could use a little more thought in the way we ask our questions and approach whoever we're speaking to. So that's the first thing.
And to judge negatively when experiments are made.
Right. This.
You know,
Yes.
look at the biography of someone like Buckminster Fuller, who, he had to come to the point of suicide as an adult with the death of a child, to say either I'm going to jump off the bridge or I'm going to help humanity,
Right.
that had to come to that crisis. But so many young people we know have tried, working as a hairdresser, selling tea, doing, 5 or 6 different things, and all the time being judged, usually negatively. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, they're doing something spectacular, but they needed, to
Right.
find their way.
But it goes even back farther than that. The first thing kids learn is don't make a mistake.
Right.
If you get the problem wrong, if you say it wrong, if you can't spell correctly, you just are up to it. And that is, talk about imagination being stifled. Example from my grandson's life. He woke up on a Sunday morning a few weeks ago and wanted a Slurpee. He's never had a Slurpee, he doesn't know, never seen one, but he drew a picture of one and he spelled it Slrpee. His mother said, how do you know about that? He said, I've seen them, people have them, I want one. It's like, but Slurpee was clear enough without the usual vowels in there to make it obvious what he was trying to say. So nobody said, that's not the way to spell it. They said, okay, we'll get you one. So anyway, I think that the quashing of the experimental spirit in children, which is the same thing as reclaiming their imagination, comes from denying them any avenue to say, oh, well, that was an experiment. This is what I learned. This is what I learned that was not useful, So be a hairdresser, be a barista.
I put a quote in the chat that I don't find particularly helpful.
Yeah.
That
is not very helpful.
Well, yeah. I appreciate the holding up the ideal, but very few human beings are going to be capable of achieving the ideal, at least in a current state of evolution. But there's a lot that can be done without perfection.
But there's no timeline for that. So you figure that we're all a work in progress and we have to keep working at it. Not that we have to arrive at that end point at some stated time in our lives. I'm hoping to reach some approximation of that within the next 10 years. So,
Good
or
luck.
die trying. I don't know.
Well, the die trying is that's
That's-
definitely achievable.
That is definitely achievable.
Absolutely.
No,
For us all.
And I think a lot of, from my notice is, the gap between the conflict, I think, from their own inner nature, that we call Swadharma, and what the society would accept them. And I think, and that's where I think a lot of this conflict and confusion happens. And, lately, a lot of the psychological issues are because of the gap between our outer and inner self, and which is going against the nature, that they're either they're going it to fit into the society or to be acceptable, or and I think in a lot of adults also, it's not just youth, but then I think it's we are picking up from each other or from our environment.
Yeah, that's so true. There's such a great fear of failure, and then also a pressure to earn money, to do something practical. And of course, you have to appreciate that, because all humans have certain basic needs that they have to have met. But one thing, I guess it's just something that stuck with me from growing up in my neighborhood in southwestern Virginia. There was a man across the street whose family had a hardware business, and he had been expected in his youth to grow up to run the hardware business. He wanted to be an artist, and he made interesting sculptures and paintings that I had seen when visiting the family down in his basement. Well, of course, he was never allowed to become an artist. And he ended up many years later committing suicide. Now, I don't know the reasons for that. I can never determine that, and it wasn't really made known. But I think when, it pointed out to me very vividly and shockingly the significance and the importance of a person being able to fulfill his own nature, his or her own nature. And as a society, we give very little latitude to that, but we're freer than many other societies in order to do that. But in the educational systems, if we can nurture those thoughts that people have an inner nature and may have a calling or a mission in life, whatever degree of that there is, it doesn't have to be anything grandiose. Maybe this gentleman would have been a really bad artist, and not made very good paintings or very good sculptures. But, we'll never know. But at least to have the opportunity to explore. And I think young people are made to make decisions so early, and they're also sort of locked in once they make those decisions, because higher education especially, is so expensive.
Well, it's so crushing for me, following Indian culture and reading the Indian newspapers, to see the number of suicides among these young students who don't pass a test, or the pressure that's on them. And it was literally, Pondicherry had one of the highest suicide rates in the general population. And it's just crushing to feel that this vision is being held there, but that the conventional systems of education are so test oriented and so competitive, and so much pressure goes on these kids that one failure results in their deaths at their own hands, and how crushing that is for society, for the parents, for everything. And I just my heart aches over that, because unfortunately the kind of rote learning and wrong values, everything seems upside down to where it should be.